Good morning and welcome to News Now. I'm your host Silas Botham and this is my co-host Sammy Rhodes.
Today we have a couple of guests with us. We have Mean-Jeans.
Hello, I'm Sophia Franz, the CEO of Mean-Jeans.
I'm Jasmine Hendricks, the assistant to the CEO of Mean-Jeans.
And we also have the founder of Watchdogs.
Hello, my name is Sullivan Schwab.
And his assistant.
I'm Aaron Fincher, the assistant to the founder of Watchdogs.
Alright, let's start with wages. So let's begin with Consumer Watchdogs. You want Mean-Jeans to increase their minimum wage, yet Mean-Jeans pays its factory workers more than any alternative job. Why should they increase when they already pay their workers the most?
Now, just because they pay more than what is the standard in Denimstan, they do not pay living wages in Denimstan, which they should, as they are a huge company which should be able to give this money to their workers who are the basis of their company. And just because they pay better doesn't mean that they pay well. They need to pay what is the living cost in Denimstan and not just better than what other companies who are also exploiting these workers pay.
And do you know the living cost in Denimstan?
It is around $800 per month.
And do you know $7 a day times 30?
It's, I want to say around $160 a month. Could be wrong.
$210.
$210.
So that's about like $600 or $590 difference.
Yeah.
So Mean-Jeans, that's a pretty big gap. What do you have to say about that? The massive gap.
Well, just because we don't necessarily pay living wages, that doesn't mean that we're the only company that's not paying living wages. And as our host Silas has said, we do currently pay the most out of any other company in Denimstan. So where else are they going to go to get at least money that they can provide for themselves to a certain extent from? It has been acknowledged that those who live in Denimstan and other countries that are very similar, like Bangladesh, the people who work in these factories are significantly better off than people who don't. So we're still trying to provide for them. And even in the US, there are still, of course, jobs that don't necessarily pay living wages. That's what it's going to be like in any country, and we are still trying our best to improve the working conditions for these people, and we may end up improving our wages too, but we are already paying significantly more than any other company.
Okay. Alright, so Mean-Jeans, Consumer Watchdogs has wanted you to offer insurance to your workers. Have you considered to take this step to offer it? If you haven't considered it, then why?
Well, we are in the process of taking steps to offer it, but this is a fairly complicated matter. Denimstan is an extremely underinsured nation, and most people living there have no insurance at all, garment industry workers or not. And there are virtually no large companies that offer insurance to their workers, so we would be one of the first. We have no model to go off of. This is just us. However, we do plan to work with this startup called Apon Wellbeing, and they set up inside factories to sell food and goods at a discount to the workers, and each $1.25 spent at the work is equal to a point. And according to their website, aponwellbeing.com, with 200 points, the worker gains access to zero cash health coverage, allowing her or him to get free medical diagnosis and prescriptions from a doctor, maternity, hospitalization, and life coverage. This is going to be about the best that we can get as of now, and whatever it is, we will try to implement it to the best of our ability.
Alright, and do you think that's good, or do you want more? Do you see that all workers should get insurance? do?
I believe that all workers should get insurance as well as workers' benefits similar to those that are offered at many businesses and even factories in the U.S.
Alright, so let's go to working affairs and wholesale prices. So if Mean-Jeans, so this is to Consumer Watchdogs, if Mean-Jeans raises the money it spends on worker affairs in the factories, then they'll have to start raising prices of their products, and this would impact the customer's satisfaction of these products and convince them to look for more cheaper options for factories which the products are created at factories which do not give their workers benefits. And they would avoid purchasing from Mean-Jeans. Isn't it in the company's best interest to stay in business and avoid raising spending on workers' affairs?
Well, if your business model is to exploit workers, then your business model is not sustainable, because eventually these workers will become aware and they will organize unions and they will strike, and you will have to raise their wages. Now, if you were to do this now, you would avoid any bad PR and possibly get good PR from this entire scenario, as well as being the first will influence other companies to do the same, which will be good for the world as a whole and the human race as a whole.
Yes, and they could at least start off by raising their clothes prices off small, but then they could get exponentially bigger, but not too but not too big as to discourage the customers from buying the clothes. But they could at least start off raising the clothes prices a little bit to increase the workers' pay.
Mean-Jeans, do you have anything you'd like to argue against this?
Okay, so, according to Consumer Watchdogs, right here? Okay, so the competition between other brands to provide cheap clothing for the masses, has been, is why we only pay $7 per day, but it's still more than the average wage in Denimstan. We don't want our buyers to move to a different brand. We want to control the market over all other brands. And how exactly are we exploiting the workers? How exactly are we exploiting the workers, though? And our company is already trying to make a change for the better within the garment industry. We already pay our workers significantly more than the average garment worker in Bangladesh, as well as many other similar countries. If we can't meet your standards when trying to create jobs in clothing for people who need them, then would you rather have us pull out completely?
So first, answer their question. How are they exploiting the workers?
The literacy rate in the country is 72%, but the literacy rate in the garment industry in that country is 50%.
Yeah, so how do you explain that gap?
Well, that's specifically the garment industry in Bangladesh?
Yes.
Okay, well,
Denimstan.
it's the same thing. So I also have done some research on this. Literacy rates for people aged 15 to 24 is higher than 90%. So, and that's going to be the age group of people that are likely working in these factories, and because they need to provide for their family.
No, but it isn't, as the literacy rate in your factories is not 90%. So you are either hiring older people or hiring the 10% who are not literate.
Well, even still, the people who are older than 24, there is a still fairly high literacy rate. And working in our factories does require them to be at least fairly literate. So if they are not, this encourages them to actually go to school to get some sort of education, so they will not be exploited and that they will know what they were doing, so that they know what they're signing up for. Because the people in these countries know that they just can't go in just completely blind, because that's not going to be beneficial for them at all.
Well, you clearly do not need a high literacy rate to work in your factories, as 50% of your workers are not literate.
And you barely pay living prices, so how do you expect for them to pay also for the school supplies?
And schooling, as in many third world countries, schooling is not provided by the government as it is here in the United States.
Well, if their parents do, if they know people that are literate, perhaps they can assist them in,
After they
learning.
get done with their 16-hour workday?
not necessarily, they don't necessarily have to work there, to work at a factory, or they don't necessarily have to work at a factory. They could have different jobs that require them to be literate. They could potentially be doctors, they could be educators themselves, although that is likely rare. There are different scenarios.
Alright, so you mentioned you are talking about the literacy rates. So how are they exploiting the workers if they have less literacy rates in the garment workers?
Well, I do not believe that they are doing it on purpose, but if you have this huge gap of what they said 90% to 50%, that is a 40% difference. You have this 10% working as 50% of your workforce. Now, that means that people who are literate are less likely to choose their factories, which shows that they are aware that it is very, very bad conditions there.
But the fact that they're not literate is not Mean-Jeans' fault, and the fact that they chose Mean-Jeans because they were not literate and they did not know of the better alternatives is not Mean-Jeans' fault. It's just the country and the status of the education and the system of education there.
Yes. So so the only thing that could point to this correctly, because as you said, the literacy rate between 15-year-olds and 24-year-olds is 90%, but how can they be 50% in the garment industry is what I think is the job choosing, like the process of getting a job is more accepting to those who are illiterate.
Not necessarily, we can't control that. It could be that people that are literate in these countries are simply better off, because Sullivan said, the CEO here, he said that in countries like this, you may have to pay to get schooling. If they got schooling, then it is likely that they paid for it if we are going off of what he said. If they had the money to pay for it, then they are better off, so they might not have needed those factory jobs. These are for people that actually need them. So I don't see how we're necessarily taking advantage of them if we can't control them being literate, if we are not necessarily aware, if they are not, that they are not aware. This is all up to interpretation and things that we can't control.
Alright, so moving on to the next question to Mean-Jeans. Isn't it true that when you can't read, you don't know that you're being taken advantage of?
Well, to a certain extent, possibly, but when workers have nowhere else to go because they don't have a very high literacy rate, they need somewhere to go to make enough money for their home and family, just enough to get by. Even though we may not be paying enough for living, the cost it takes to live in Denimstan / Baby Mesh, doesn't mean we're not giving them anything to actually live off of.
Yes, but if they can't read, if there's that massive literacy gap, then can't they not tell if they're being taken advantage of, or if they have no working benefits or insurance or something like that, and they have no literacy, if they have no yeah.
Well, not necessarily, because even if you're not able to read, then you can still talk. It's true, you can talk to other people that have these jobs that are literate and know what is happening. You can get information from the people that are employing you. There are other ways to go about it to make sure that you are not getting taken advantage of. This isn't just a sort of thing where you're just shoved in there with no information. You can figure things out for yourself even if you can't read, because not everything is right in the papers, and people wouldn't necessarily take the time to read through everything in the first place. It's first-hand experiences. Those are the things that you can find, especially if you aren't literate. Those would be helpful to you to decide if you want to work there or not.
And how do you expect the workers to get an education if you are not even paying the living wages?
Well, we're not necessarily expecting them to get an education. That is their own choice. That it is simply an option that is there.
And you are not providing enough money for them to get an education, so it is not an option.
Well, then no other companies are providing enough money for them to get living wages, because we pay significantly more than the standard garment company in Bangladesh. The minimum wage there is about $94.93 per month. We pay about, as I said earlier, $210 per month. That is like the most they're going to get.
And $100 under with living wages.
500.
500.
About almost $600.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is,
You are not providing the resources for there to be any sort of economic growth from the lower class to the upper class in Denimstan. You are having these workers who are working these long work days, and they're going home and they're having to, and they cannot, first of all, provide food and good food and a good shelter for their children. They also won't be able to send their kids to any sort of school or anything like that. And their kids will have to go and work in these factories, and they will never be able to rise from like lower class to upper class. You are keeping the lower class down while profiting yourselves and while letting the American people exploit these workers.
well, if we can never meet your standards, we can't meet your standards on living wages, not safety, even though we are taking steps, not insurance, then would you rather have us pull out of these countries completely and leave it no job options for these people who do need money, and we are trying to make an effort to pay them more and give them things that will help them? Would you rather have us pull out and just be gone?
No, I want there to be wages where people can actually sustain themselves in this country,
And
there to be and get an education for them or their children, and there to be safety so that they won't have to bring their children to work, and so that they so they won't have to bring their kids to work because they can't go to school or can't even afford any sort of babysitter.
Okay, wouldn't that turn to safety hazards if they are bringing their children to work because they have such long hours and they can't provide education for their children? Wouldn't that put the children's lives in jeopardy? Because the garment factories are quite dangerous, as the incidents in Bangladesh have shown us, like the Rana Plaza and like killing 1,000 people. Couldn't that put the children's lives in jeopardy when they could be getting a better education?
Perhaps in other garment factories, but not ours, because In fact, speaking of the Rana Plaza incident, we followed the Accord on Fire and Building Safety, which was in fact created after the Rana Plaza collapse, to hopefully stop these same exact incidents from happening more frequently and just at all. This accord allows for routine factory inspections for fire, electrical, and structural safety. It monitors all safety remediation processes within the factories. They provide for trained safety committees, and they inform all factory workers about workplace safety and also allow workers to raise complaints and refuse unsafe work, so that if they feel uncomfortable doing something that in our factory, they can refuse it. They don't necessarily have to do this.
Does this mean that you accept that your workers are still bringing their children into the workplace?
Well, as long as they are safe, we can't necessarily control that. If their children have nowhere else to go, this is up to the parents.
But have you ever wondered why they have nowhere else to go?
Again, we can't control where they bring their children or what they're doing.
Well, they have nowhere else to go because you don't pay them a living wage.
And you could pay them a living wage if you only raised your prices in America for the clothes.
But again, we don't want buyers to go to competitors, and if our competitors have even lower prices than us, how much do you think they're paying their workers?
Well, you need to be able to set an industry standard of treating these people as though they are actually people.
And you could advertise that you are doing that. You could advertise like the previous, like you could advertise the previous living wages and the living wages that you would be paying them, and it could affect the buying of that because of because of paying the living wages.
Do you really think that even if we advertise the good things that we're doing, that the standard American person who is buying these cheap clothes because they are cheap is going to really care?
Yes, because if you were to find something in the store that says, "Oh, this is raising money for Denimstan," would you buy it?
Would you? Well,
Yes.
Of course you would. You're biased. But would
Oh my god. So are you.
Well, I'm talking about the average American person.
I could get an interview with all of them.
But
All of
All
the
very
American
under
persons.
33
Well,
million.
how about like our target demographic? How about these people who need these clothes because they are cheap? They need them for that. Do you think they would necessarily buy our brand when it's priced higher because they know that we are making even more of an effort than we already are to help provide for these people? Do you think they're really going to care? And do you think other industries and companies are really going to care if they don't see any good in it?
Well, I'd just like to ask this next question. Do you think that U.S. buyers would be willing to pay more if they just in general knew that the workers would benefit from it?
I wouldn't think they'd be willing to pay more, even if they knew that the workers were being benefited, because people are greedy. So they wouldn't be really willing to pay more because because people are already because other people are having their problems. People aren't going to use their money to solve other people's problems because that's just how humans are. They're pretty greedy sometimes. So yeah.
You say that the U.S. buyers already have their own problems and they aren't willing to pay more money to solve other problems. Now, your jeans currently are marketed towards lower class people who cannot afford the premium or more expensive jeans. Well, if you were to raise your price of your jeans and then start a marketing campaign showing why your jeans are created in humane environments, then you might, instead of selling to the lower class of people, you will sell to maybe the middle to upper class who do care and have the extra money to spend to support these workers. Now, this might take a little bit out of your bottom line, and you might get a little bit less profit per year, but that is necessary so that these workers can have these living wages and they can actually live.
Okay, well, I understand that, and if we can pay our, if we in the future may decide to take the chance and pay our workers more, we are already taking steps to do these other things, so we want to focus on these things first before we get to raising our wages higher, because they're already well above the standard there, but we need to take care of other things and other things in the list of what you want done. We are trying to do that, so let us do that first. And still, how do we know, how do you know that rich people will care? It doesn't mean that they will.
Just because you charge $10 more for your clothes does not mean that only rich people will buy them.
Well, what if it's more than $10?
Well, why would you charge more than $10?
You tell me.
You guys are the ones who want this to be more.
Yeah, but we did not say exceed $10.
You never said anything about how much exactly our prices would be raised. And you are, well, raising this question, raising this opportunity. So how much would we raise our wages, and how much would the prices go up? You tell me.
We don't know, but it
So
might
how do
have to
you
be a
know?
combination.
You know.
It might have to be
We
a
don't, that's why I'm asking you. I'm saying, how do you know that it wouldn't be more than $10?
We don't. It might have to be a combination of raising your wages, which raise your prices, and maybe decreasing the wages of some of the company higher-ups, such as you, or your assistant.
Alright, so you keep on saying wages increased. Do you want them increased to the bare minimum in your case of the Denimstan working salary
Yes.
of $800 a month?
Yes.
So that would be $27 a day, which is about a 350% increase, which would probably send their products flying and no one would buy them, and then the company would go under. So
Yeah.
if the company just goes under because they're increasing the working benefits, then eventually in the long term, those benefits will go away to those workers and they'll never get them. And so where's the line?
We're not
Well,
saying that you could
we-
pay the full living wages, but you could at least
But that's
start.
what you were asking.
No,
But we could at least
you
start
could start
out
by
by-
raising the wages. So, for one, you could start by raising the wages per day. So, we don't want all the way from $7 to $27. We would like maybe $10 in 1 year. Then the next year, 15 or 12 or somewhere. You just want an increase so that these workers can start to live more comfortably and maybe educate their kids so that they can be in the upper class of Denimstan.
Well, even if we do slowly raise our prices, as Silas said, it's just gonna skyrocket, and if people decide not to buy our jeans, even if they know or don't know about what we're doing and why we're raising the prices, as he said, our company could go under, and then everything would just have been for nothing, and these workers would now be paid less and less and less because of the decisions that we made before. So we need to take things slowly, just one step at a time.
That's what we were
Alright.
suggesting.
Alright, so in the last few minutes of this debate, what does each side want to benefit from this debate? What do you want to come out of this?
I would like for Mean-Jeans to both increase their wages and establish worker benefits and insurance and increase the safety of their factories, so that way these workers in Denimstan can rise from the lower class into the middle or upper class, and that we can see just a better life for these workers.
And we are not saying to do this all at once. We are saying that we can do it like over like a couple years of a period. No matter how long, you guys should still be able to achieve at least living wages.
And you should strive to achieve these things.
We are. I think that out of this debate, we hope for more awareness of how, instead of just sitting back and letting things go on as they have been for a very long time in this industry, we want to let people know how we are trying to make a change for the better, unlike many other companies. We don't want the reputation of the garment industry to continue to negatively impact us when we are trying to do something better for our workers. And yes, it may be over time, even though if we do it over time, we're still going to get slammed for not doing these things despite trying to make an effort. So I just want everyone to know that we are trying to make an effort. We would like these workers to have better conditions. We are trying to institute programs that will give them workers' benefits and insurance, despite that basically not existing at all in these countries. These are difficult things that we are trying to get done just one at a time.
And that everything that we have said, we do not require anything that we have said, but we are suggesting it. As you were said, you are trying to give them better wages, better workers' rights, better everything. But that's what we are trying to achieve as well. We are not saying to do this all at once. We are trying to say to do it in a sustainable period.
Well, if we're supposedly on the same page, then why are you attacking us like this?
Alright, thank you for coming.
That's about all the time we have for today.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Goodbye.
coming, Mean-Jeans CEO and
The Weather
assistant Jasmine and
Cool.
Sophia, and Consumer Watchdog Sullivan and Aaron.
Goodbye.